Hello, Darklings! So, one of my favorite novels that has been adapted many times and made into many movies that I'm really fond of is The Phantom of the Opera. So, many people have not read this book, which is majorly disappointing to me. It's not very long and it's very interesting, and there's a lot of motifs in the original novel that have been overlooked. But I wanted to kind of mention how it's been brought up in pop culture and how many films it's been made into, and one of the reasons why you should love this story if you don't already. So it was originally published in serial form in France from 1909 to 1910, and then was published as a full novel at the end of 1910 and then translated into English in 1911. It's by Gaston Leroux, which I think I pronounced correctly, but I'm really bad at French. And it's about a young opera singer who is Swedish, so in the original novel she's blonde. And she is an orphan raised in the Paris Opera House and gets mysterious tutoring on her singing by a voice in the walls, the Phantom, who, as it turns out, is a disfigured man who has a giant crush on her, and things go awry. And then her childhood sweetheart shows up and then defends her honor, and there's a lot of things in the book that have not made it to most of the film versions. Now, the most accurate film version that I have seen is the 1925 version from Universal Studios. That poster right behind me that you can kind of see, even though it's backward, is for that film, and it is a silent film. And a lot of people don't seem to realize that before the musical, it existed. And this is one of my favorite adaptations with Lon Chaney and Mary Philbin. And it's very good, very well dramatized. I really do love Lon Chaney a lot, which is why I got his face tattooed on my leg. This version is definitely skipped over, especially in newer generations that do not watch silent films, which makes me quite sad. And I have mentioned it in other videos, and if you haven't seen it yet, go take a look. The full thing is on YouTube in its entirety, and there is this fantastic 3-minute hand-colored sequence during the masquerade that I absolutely adore, and I just get all nerdy about every time. So the next version that was adapted for the silver screen was Song at Midnight in China in 1937. This is the only version on this list I have not seen yet, and I will get around to it. I can't vouch whether or not it's good or bad, but it did have a couple of remakes in China over the course of the next several decades. The 1943 Universal Studios remake with Claude Rains is definitely worth noting. It's very pretty. It's in Technicolor. They use the same soundstage that they used for the 1925 version, which up until last year was the longest standing single soundstage in the Universal lot because it was deemed haunted because of Phantom of the Opera. Fun fact, if you didn't already know. It's not exactly very much based off of the original story. It changed a lot in this version. The Phantom was a fairly well-respected but rather poor violinist whose face was disfigured after someone stole his concerto, and then he becomes the terror of the opera house. He goes insane after his disfigurement, as opposed to the original story where he was born disfigured. Now, in 1962, Hammer Film Company did their own version of it, which is definitely very silly and a little over-dramatized, as only Hammer can do. I have a weak spot for Hammer Film Company. And they were the first ones to use the D minor, dun-dun-dun-dun, for dramatic effect, and it has since become a staple in the horror community, but that is where it started when it comes to horror films. Then in 1974, one of my other really favorite movies, which for some reason not enough people have seen, which is The Phantom of the Paradise. Now, this is based off of the novel, the 1943 version of the film, and a lot of Faust. Now, the original novel has a lot of themes that have to do with Faust, and even if you haven't read that story, I hope you're at least familiar with the idea, which is a man sells his soul to the devil. And it's definitely very prevalent within the story and most of the film adaptations. And this is also taking place in the modern age, which is 1974 in this case. So it deals with the most popular rock music of the time, which is glam rock, which I have a major weakness for, and this is an amazing cult film that I suggest watching. The next one that I have on this list is from 1989. This is considered the most violent and yet still somehow close to the book versions. And it's modern day, takes place in New York City with Robert Englund. And it has a lot more of the Faust elements in it, and it's very strange and dark, and it's on Netflix if you haven't seen it yet. I highly recommend it. This next one I do not recommend, but have to mention anyway because I really do like Dario Argento, but his 1998 version of Phantom of the Opera is an abomination. He has his daughter play Christine, and the Phantom is not disfigured, just raised by rats. Oh no. No, no. It's one of those things where if you want to watch it, it's like watching a train wreck you don't want to see. But I figured it was worth the mention. And then the 2004 Joel Schumacher version, which is the musical based off of the classic play, is the one that is the most well-known and the most recognized and the most referenced. And as far as the majority of the world is concerned, is the only version in existence. I like this film. It's very, very pretty. I am exceedingly amused that Andrew Lloyd Webber handpicked Joel Schumacher to direct this film in 1988 because he liked The Lost Boys. That fact will forever be funny to me. But I wish that someone other than Gerard Butler had played the Phantom secretly, more than anyone. I know it sounds odd. Hugh Jackman is who I would have picked. That's pretty much my only problem with it. Otherwise, I do like it quite a bit. It's very pretty. I appreciate that the girl who played Christine was actually 16 as the character is supposed to be. But it's kind of overdone by this point because it's apparently the only one anyone's ever aware of. The next version that came out was the 2011 live recording at the Royal Albert Hall of the stage production. And I mean, that one's on Netflix if you want to watch it. It's a good way to get some firsthand of what the music is truly like instead of being over-dramatized in the film. And then, this is kind of odd and doesn't precisely fit, is 2014 on Netflix there is this really ridiculous movie called Stage Fright that takes a lot of themes from the original Phantom of the Opera story. It's not exactly close, but it's a fun watch, and I included it on another list. It also just takes some other pop culture relevant things and takes place in a theater camp, which is always going to be a terrible idea. So I've also seen the play 3 times in 3 different cities, and I've been a big fan of this story since I was 10. And I know not everybody has quite the attachment to this, but if you are going to love this, or if you do love this, please understand that the Phantom's obsession with Christine is not healthy. Please, don't think that she should have been with him. Please, you're missing the point of the story. I have to throw that out there because I've definitely talked to too many people who are like, oh, well, they should have been together. I'm like, you completely misunderstood the story, and it bothers me. So, if you are not familiar with Phantom of the Opera, I do suggest reading the book. It isn't very long. It's less than 300 pages. It's fairly easy to read. The sort of interactions between the characters and a couple of the characters that were in the story that never made it into the majority of the film versions are definitely something that could have been beneficial. Anyway, so this is a little babbly, but it's one of my favorite subjects. And I hope that you like these movies anywhere near as much as I do. Till next time, Darklings.